The story begins in a dark room, where the protagonist Fong Xiaolun suddenly wakes up from a dream. However, the moment he opened his eyes, his world changed. Everyone had an extra egg on their head. The only difference was that while everyone else's eggs were white and flawless, his was jet black. What was even more strange was that on the black egg shell, a countdown was glaringly displayed. 11 hours, 54 minutes, and 13 seconds. With a lot of questions in his mind, he went to class, but what greeted him was an even more bizarre sight. Every person in the class had an egg on their head. He glanced quietly at his classmate Li Yin and whispered, "You really didn't see anything strange?" Li Yin frowned, looked around, and looked at him doubtfully. "See anything? You've asked me that several times today. Are you okay?" At this moment, Fong Xiaolun was finally certain. These eggs, only he could see them. The whole day's course passed, and the countdown on the black egg quietly passed away, leaving only 5 hours and 46 minutes. During this time, countless speculations flashed through his mind. What would happen to the egg when the time ran out? Would it explode? Would it blow him up? Or would it hatch some kind of monster that would devour him? Fong Xiaolun looked at the slowly ticking numbers on the black egg, and all sorts of terrifying scenarios flashed through his mind. But on second thought, death seemed like nothing to be concerned about for him. Thinking about this, he felt relieved, and his entire body instantly entered a state of salted fish possession. Li Yin, who was standing nearby, saw his listless appearance and couldn't help but pat his shoulder. "Hey, Xiaolun, do you want to go to the wall with us tonight to get some fresh air?" Fong Xiaolun lazily looked up at him with vacant eyes. "What are you going to the wall for?" Li Yin spoke mysteriously in a low voice, his eyes full of excitement. Yao Tian found a big red egg and secretly hid it near the wall. A big red egg? Fong Xiaolun's spirits lifted, and the tiredness in his body instantly dissipated. Could this be related to his black egg? Li Yin continued, "Meet at the West City Park at 7 o'clock tonight. Do you want to come together?" Fong Xiaolun raised his hand to check the time and do some calculations. At 7 o'clock, there would be about 3 hours left on the countdown timer for the black egg, which would be plenty of time. Without hesitation, he nodded, "Sure, I'll go with you." As night fell, it was exactly 7 o'clock at Qingxi Park. Li Yin led Fong Xiaolun to the meeting point. Night had fallen, and an indescribable sense of strangeness filled the air. Yao Tian glanced at Fong Xiaolun and asked indifferently, "Who is this?" Li Yin smiled and patted Fong Xiaolun on the shoulder, introducing him. "His name is Fong Xiaolun. He's in the same major as me. I saw that you said you wanted to have some fun, so I asked him to come along." Yao Tian nodded at this, his expression showing no emotion. "So you're a junior. Okay, everyone's here, let's go." Fong Xiaolun followed the group for a while and gradually sensed something was wrong. There was no egg on Yao Tian's head. His heart tightened, and he glanced at Yao Tian quietly. An unsettling thought involuntarily came to mind. Had his egg already broken? Seemingly sensing his unease, Li Yin reached out and patted him on the shoulder, speaking in a relaxed tone. "Don't be afraid. There are so many people here. What could possibly happen?" Fong Xiaolun's atoms apple-rolled slightly. Although his doubts had not completely dissipated, he temporarily suppressed his vigilance and continued to follow the group. Soon after, they entered the radiation zone of the barrier. The air currents became viscous, and the surrounding light seemed to distort slightly. This is an independent ecosystem, and it is said that new biological chains are born here on a regular basis. However, since these ecosystems are relatively small and do not really affect the safety of the city, most people are not afraid. Someone in the group whispered, "The wall is just ahead." There was a hint of nervousness in their voice. The wall, a colossus that has stood at the end of the world since Fong Xiaolun's birth. It is like a huge sphere, perfectly round and flawless, enveloping the entire world within it, like the most perfect prison between heaven and earth. Countless scientists have devoted their entire lives to studying it, but they have never been able to unlock its secrets. Not even a scratch can be found, as it seems to instantly heal itself, as if it does not allow any external forces to erode it. There are endless rumors about the wall. Some say that someone has successfully crossed it and seen the outside world. But this is just an unconfirmed legend. If that legend is true, then is there someone like them on the other side of the wall? And are those people trying to get in here? Just as Fong Xiaolun was lost in thought, Li Yin suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. "By the way, Tiange, where did you hide that big red egg?" Upon hearing this, Yao Tian suddenly revealed a strange smile. His eyes seemed to contain an indescribable emotion. The next second, his nape of the neck slightly distorted like smoke, as if something was breaking out of its cocoon. The skin was writhing, and the fascia seemed to be cracking. Just as everyone watched in horror, a red egg slowly emerged from Yao Tian's nape. The air seemed to have frozen, and everyone froze in place, their faces of horror gradually growing larger. Immediately afterwards, screams could be heard everywhere, and the crowd scattered like an explosion. They desperately shoved and ran, just trying to get as far away from this strange scene as possible. Only Feng Xiaoluan, trapped in place. His body was tense, cold sweat running down his forehead. His voice was low and guarded. "What do you want?" Yao Tian smiled slightly, his expression unervingly calm. He slowly reached out his hand and gently held the red egg, his voice low and eerie. "Didn't you want to see the red egg? Now, I've shown it to you. This egg is a treasure. It has allowed me to be reborn and to see a different vision." His tone was as if he were possessed by some kind of madness, and his eyes gleamed with an unusual light. However, Feng Xiaolun was not at all interested. His voice was cold. "No matter what rebirth or vision, I'm not interested." After saying this, he turned around without hesitation and ran. However, the next second, Yao Tian's back suddenly twisted and a pair of strange, elongated arms suddenly reached out. Those hands were incredibly fast, and like a viper, they instantly wrapped around Feng Xiaolun's body. He didn't even have time to react before he was grabbed. Fear instantly swept over his body, and Feng Xiaolun struggled desperately. But the next moment, he was dragged back hard. Feng Xiaolun was dragged back to Yao Tian's side, his heels scraping the ground and leaving a long trail behind him. Yao Tian leaned closer, whispering in a low, sinister voice, "Tell me, why did my red egg react to you?" As soon as the words fell from his lips, the red egg in Yao Tian's palm suddenly trembled violently. The surface of the eggshell twisted and expanded. The next second, 5 dark eyes suddenly opened, and then the eggshell cracked open with a terrifying mouth. Feng Xiaolun stared at the strange egg, his throat tightening, his lips trembling slightly, shocked and unable to speak. When did this egg look like this? His heart was pounding and cold sweat was dripping down his face. Meanwhile, the red egg slowly approached the black egg above his head, as if being drawn by some invisible force. Feng Xiaolun's pupils shrank, and an alarm went off in his mind. It wasn't reacting to me, but to the black egg on me. The next second, the mouth of the red egg suddenly opened wide, revealing wriggling tentacles, which bit down hard at the black egg without hesitation. However, just as the red egg's sharp teeth were about to close, the black egg suddenly flashed with a strange light. The next moment, the black egg's figure instantly blurred, as if swallowed by some kind of spatial distortion, and in the blink of an eye, it appeared on top of the red egg's head. Immediately afterwards, the surface of the black egg wriggled violently, and cracks spread out like veins, growing several tentacles like arms. The tentacles stretched out violently in the air, glowing with a cold light, as if they carried some kind of unbreakable sharpness. The next second, the cold light interlaced, as if the air had been cut apart. The red egg was instantly cleaved into countless pieces. Feng Xiaolun was dumbfounded, his heart pounding wildly. His voice was incredulous. "My black egg is actually so strong." On the ground, the fragments of the red egg scattered, and Yao Tian's body shook slightly as well, before collapsing to the ground as if all his strength had been sucked away. Feng Xiaolun hurriedly went over to check on him, his heart tightening as he reached out to feel Yao Tian's nose. There was no breathing. However, he did not notice that behind him, a fragment of the red egg was quietly wriggling. A flesh bud slowly grew on the surface of the eggshell, twisting slowly as if it had a life of its own. The end of the flesh bud swelled and gradually coalesced into a dark orb. The orb trembled slightly and then slowly fell off, crashing to the ground. Pop, a slight cracking sound rang out. The next moment, a wriggling worm, emerging from the black orb, slowly unfurling its strange limbs. Feng Xiaolun was oblivious, his attention still fixed on Yao Tian's fallen body, his heart pounding. However, just then, the strange worm suddenly shuddered violently, and the next moment, like a flash of black lightning, it burrowed towards the soles of Yao Tian's feet. Its body instantly disappeared into the flesh, silently, as if it had never existed. The next second, Yao Tian's body convulsed violently, his limbs spasming violently like he had been electrocuted. His whole body seemed to be pulled by an invisible force, his joints twisting at unnatural angles. And then, He actually stood back up. Fang Xiaoluan was stunned, staring in disbelief as Yao Tian's body underwent strange changes before his eyes. His palms had begun to twist at some unknown point, his knuckles bursting open, flesh and blood gushing out, giving rise to a number of dark, sharp claws. And what was even more terrifying was that a circular, deep hole had suddenly opened up in his chest. Fang Xiaoluan stared at the hole, and an indescribable feeling of intense unease welled up in his heart. His lips trembled as he muttered, What the hell is going on? Was that really a hole? No, it looked more like a keyhole. Just as he was in a daze, Yao Tian suddenly let out a low laugh. At first, it was just a tremor in his throat, but then the laugh grew longer and longer, until it finally turned into a strange groan. He. The hunting game is about to begin. Fang Xiaoluan snapped back to reality. His heart felt as if it had been squeezed hard, his face changing drastically. Hunting game? What the hell is this? He looked down at his black egg. The numbers were still ticking, and the countdown was displayed. 1 hour, 54 minutes. At this point, Yao Tian's already mutated body leaned slightly forward. His voice was low and hoarse, and a twisted smile slowly spread across the corner of his mouth. The eggs around me are completely black. Unlike US, they're different species, aren't they? Fang Xiaoluan frowned, took a half step back, and asked warily, What are you talking about? What do you mean by different species? Yao Tian let out a low chuckle, his eyes deep and mysterious. Humans, you should have already noticed that the eggs of the people around you are all white. They are ingredients. The red eggs are soldiers. As for the black eggs, he paused slightly, and the smile on the corner of his mouth widened. They are different. Fang Xiaoluan stared at the black egg above his head, his heart churning with fear. He muttered, My black egg is an alien? That's right, Yao Tian snorted, his madness becoming more and more obvious. Aliens, to red eggs, cannot be captured but can be hunted. However, he suddenly licked the corner of his mouth, his voice slowly lowering. I prefer to hunt. Before he could finish speaking, Yao Tian's figure suddenly shot out. He saw the sharp claws on his fingertips raised high, flashing with cold light, with a murderous intent, slashing down at Fang Xiaoluan's chest. SSSHHHHHH. The sound of clothes tearing suddenly exploded in the air. Fang Xiaoluan felt a sharp pain in his chest, and his body instantly flew backwards, crashing to the ground. Fang Xiaoluan clenched his teeth. The intense pain made him feel dazed for a moment, but he still forced himself to look up, staring at his black egg and growling. Aren't you awesome? Why aren't you helping me? However, Yao Tian burst out laughing, his hoarse, low laugh full of an indescribable mockery. Oh, you actually hoped it would help? He slowly narrowed his eyes, and a mocking sneer appeared at the corner of his lips. Ha. Impossible. When we are in the form of independent eggs, we cannot directly attack humans, unless we merge with you. Fang Xiaoluan's face suddenly changed, and his pupils slightly contracted. Merge! But before he could think deeply about it, Yao Tian's figure once again rushed towards him. Fang Xiaoluan's heart pounded wildly, and instinctively he rolled to the side with all his might, narrowly avoiding the sharp claws that came down at high speed. But Yao Tian didn't pause for a moment. Like a cat playing with its prey, he closed in on Fang Xiaoluan, his smile growing ever crueler. Don't struggle. You can't escape. Fang Xiaoluan gasped for breath, his heartbeat almost bursting his chest. He ran as fast as he could, while scanning the surroundings frantically, trying to find any chance to fight back. However, Yao Tian was incredibly fast. In just a few seconds, he had caught up. The next moment, Yao Tian leapt up and kicked out with all his strength. Fang Xiaoluan felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, and the entire person was kicked hard and flew out, as if a kite with a broken string, and slammed heavily onto the ground. Fang Xiaoluan fell heavily to the ground, and the intense pain exploded inside his body, as if his internal organs had been shaken and displaced, and his consciousness was in a daze. -22. He gritted his teeth and just wanted to get up, when he felt a cold, murderous intent suddenly enveloping his back. Yao Tian's figure had already closed in, raising his menacing sharp claws high, flashing with cold light, and stabbing straight at his head. Fang Xiaoluan's eyes reflected the rapidly falling sharp claws, and his pupils suddenly contracted. It's over. Am I going to die? At the critical moment, Fang Xiaoluan's black egg suddenly sent out a strange ripple, as if the surface of a lake had been shaken by an invisible force, spreading out in layers. Yao Tian's movements instantly came to a halt. His pupils trembled slightly, as if suppressed by some force. His entire body froze in midair, with the talon only millimeters from Feng Xiaolun's head. Feng Xiaolun was stunned, completely unprepared for this situation. But he quickly reacted, and with great pain, he rolled over and got up. Without thinking, he started running. He ran like crazy the whole way, the air whistling past his ears, his heart pounding wildly. Half an hour later, Feng Xiaolun was still running, his clothes soaked with sweat, but a sense of unease gradually crept up. Strange, why haven't I run out of the radiation zone yet? At this moment, between the tree canopies above his head, a vague figure quietly emerged, hidden among the dense branches and leaves, calmly watching him. The man stood still, and behind him, there was a strange egg floating in the air. That egg was different from all the eggs he had ever seen, and the strangest thing was that it had actually spoken of its own accord. Master, that thing's completely black and has stopped the time bomb that IT should be the egg of destruction. The man narrowed his eyes slightly, his gaze deep and calm as he said, "Don't jump to conclusions. Let's see what happens." Feng Xiaolun didn't know how long he had been running until a dark cave appeared in the distance. Without the slightest hesitation, he charged straight in and hid in the shadows. Only then did he finally catch his breath and look up at the black egg above him. Just now, that guy suddenly couldn't move. "You helped me, didn't you?" he asked softly, still shaken, and whispered, "Thanks." However, when his gaze really fell on the black egg, his pupils suddenly contracted and his face suddenly changed. Wait, the time on the black egg? Why is there only 3 minutes left? His heart sank suddenly, and Feng Xiaolun gasped. He had originally thought that he still had plenty of time, but now, the countdown had only 3 minutes left. No way. If this thing really explodes like a bomb, I'll be dead for sure if I stay here. Feng Xiaolun subconsciously wanted to rush out of the cave, but as soon as he stood up, he suddenly realized that his limbs felt like they were filled with lead, and he couldn't use any strength at all. What's going on? He gritted his teeth and tried to take a step, but he couldn't even stand still. In the end, he could only weakly slide back to the ground, leaning against the cold cave wall, and helplessly smiled wryly. Forget it. If I'm going to die, it doesn't matter where. The countdown on the black egg was ticking furiously. 20 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds. Feng Xiaolun took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and tensed up before suddenly tilting his head back and yelling, "Ah, come on." 4, 3, 2, 1. As the countdown reached 0, Feng Xiaolun suddenly opened his eyes. However, the expected explosion did not occur. The air was quiet, and the cave was deathly silent. What? He froze and looked around. His gaze slowly moved upwards, finally landing on the black egg. The next second, his pupils suddenly contracted. On the top of the black egg, there was a key growing. Feng Xiaolun was full of question marks, his whole body stunned. Mumbling, "What? What's going on?" A key. The black egg gently rotated in midair and floated slowly in front of Feng Xiaolun, as if indicating to him to pull out the key. Feng Xiaolun swallowed, his palms slightly sweating. He took a deep breath, cautiously reached out his hand, and the moment his fingertips touched the key, he felt a cold sensation that he gently applied pressure and pulled it out of the black egg. At the moment the key came off, the countdown numbers on the surface of the black egg suddenly trembled, spinning wildly, as if out of control. Then, the numbers suddenly reset to 0, and the next second, they jumped back to midnight. Feng Xiaolun's eyes widened in shock, and he muttered the time. Reset? However, before he could think about it, heavy footsteps were heard outside the cave. In the deep darkness, a low and eerie voice slowly sounded, with a twisted smile. I found you." At the same time, in the shadows in the distance, 2 figures silently watched everything that was happening inside the cave. The owner of the black and white egg raised an eyebrow slightly, while the egg, with its black and white stripes, slowly rotated, emitting a mechanical sound. This engineer's egg is really cocky. He actually dared to go in directly. "Should we follow?" The man pondered for a moment, his gaze cold and deep, before calmly replying, "Follow." However, they mustn't sense our presence. Inside the cave, Feng Xiaolun looked up, his heart suddenly tightening. In the shadows at the cave entrance, a distorted figure slowly emerged. Yao Tian's face was covered in a hideous smile, his eyes cold and bloodthirsty, his mouth slowly cracking open to reveal his menacing teeth as he whispered and chuckled, "We meet again." Feng Xiaolun was shocked, took a sharp step back, and stared with wide eyes. "Holy shit, how did you find me?" Yao Tian licked his dry lips, revealing a bloodthirsty smile. and stared at him coldly. "The scent of your blood is really strong." Fang Xiaolun's head ached. He had thought that he could finally catch his breath after hiding in the cave, but this guy had actually tracked him down again. Things were already chaotic enough, and now he was even trying to stir up trouble. He absolutely had to be killed. He glanced secretly at the Black Egg and said in a low voice with gritted teeth, "Brother Black Egg, I'm counting on you. Can the key help me get out of this mess? I'll do my best to satisfy whatever you want." The Black Egg vibrated slightly, as if in response to him. The next second, a vague shadow appeared on the surface of the Black Egg, with one strange finger pointing at the key in Fang Xiaolun's hand, while the other slowly pointed at the keyhole in Yao Tian's chest. Fang Xiaolun was stunned, looked down at the key in his hand, and then looked at the strange circular hole in Yao Tian's chest. He had an epiphany, his voice slightly trembling. He muttered, "You mean, I have to insert the key into his keyhole?" The Black Egg trembled slightly, as if nodding. Fang Xiaolun took a deep breath, clenched the key tightly, gave his foot a push, and charged at Yao Tian, tried to insert the key in his chest in one go. However, Yao Tian only curled the corners of his mouth in contempt, his eyes full of mockery, naive. One with a sneer on the corners of his mouth, Yao Tian slightly sidestepped, easily avoiding Fang Xiaolun's surprise attack, his movements as fast as a gust of wind. Immediately afterwards, he raised his leg sharply and kicked Fang Xiaolun hard in the stomach. Bang! Fang Xiaolun was kicked into the air and slammed hard against the cave wall, feeling a tearing pain in his chest. He gritted his teeth and, despite the pain, got up from the ground. Cold sweat was dripping from his forehead, and his eyes were full of resignation. "Damn it, this guy's movements are too fast. I can't even get close to him." Yao Tian stood in place, laughing unabashedly, his voice full of mockery. "Ha, you actually want to attack me with this clumsy thing? It's ridiculous. How could this little trick possibly hurt me?" Fang Xiaolun narrowed his eyes and quickly scanned Yao Tian's chest with his gaze. The round keyhole was clearly visible. Did he not even realize that he had a keyhole on his body? If that was the case, then there might still be a chance. He deliberately dropped his keys on the ground, making a crisp clanking sound. Then, pretending to be disdainful, he shook his hand and said with a sneer, "This broken thing is so inconvenient. My fists are more convenient." He struck a provocative pose, hooked his finger, and raised the corner of his mouth in a sneer. "Come on, loser." Yao Tian's face instantly turned dark, his eyes bloodshot, and he charged forward, grabbing Fang Xiaolun by the neck with such force that he almost lifted him off the ground. "Who are you calling a loser?" He gnashed his teeth, burning with rage. "Ha!" He raised his hand and slapped Fang Xiaolun hard in the face, so hard that it made his ears buzz. However, at this moment, Fang Xiaolun took the opportunity to reach out and quickly grab the keys on the ground. He whispered angrily, "Black Egg, smash him." Black Egg trembled slightly, and then suddenly ejected a fist-sized stone that slammed like thunder towards Yao Tian's head. Bang! Yao Tian was stunned by this blow, and his movements instantly stopped, his eyes slightly dazed. Fang Xiaolun's eyes flashed, and seizing this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, he thrust the key into the keyhole in Yao Tian's chest with all his might. Click! The key was embedded in the lock hole with pinpoint accuracy. Fang Xiaolun clenched his hands tightly, gritted his teeth, and gave it a sharp twist. At that moment, the mysterious masked man who had just entered the cave suddenly had his pupils shrink, his face changed, and he exclaimed in a low voice, "Oh no." The next second, a violent burst of energy suddenly burst out of Yao Tian's keyhole. A strong beam of light gushed out from his chest, like a crack that ripped through the darkness. The violent energy rushed straight towards Fang Xiaolun, instantly piercing his pupils and invading his consciousness. An indescribable sense of disorientation surged through his mind, his senses completely torn apart and his thoughts violently distorted. The world spun, eerie whispers echoed in his ears, and his consciousness felt as if it had fallen into an endless abyss. Moments later, Fang Xiaolun suddenly opened his eyes, his forehead covered in cold sweat, his heart pounding wildly. However, when he looked around in shock, he realized that he was in a completely unfamiliar space. The air was filled with an endless void, and the entire world was filled with countless spheres of different sizes. Fang Xiaolun's pupils contracted violently, his voice slightly trembling. "Where the hell is this?" Fang Xiaolun hadn't yet figured out the situation when he suddenly felt a strong force coming from his side. "Sh." He stumbled, and someone yanked his arm a low, urgent voice coming to his ear. "Idiot! Don't speak so loudly. Hide quickly." Before he could even react, he was dragged along by the man in the mask, running like crazy. The two of them dashed like the wind towards a huge rock, ducked behind it, and held their breath. Almost as soon as they had hidden, a shadow slowly enveloped the area. A strange man of strange build and a giant one-eyed dog slowly appeared nearby. "Tinos," the strange man said in a low voice, tilting his head slightly. "Did you just hear a noise?" The pupil of the one-eyed giant dog contracted slightly, and then it slowly nodded and replied with a strange voice. "Well, I also heard a faint, slight sound of insects." Fong Xiaolun's heart was pounding wildly, and his body was pressed against the rock, covering his mouth tightly. Why are these two guys so big? It's almost like a small mountain. The patrolling giant slowly scanned the area, but ultimately found nothing unusual. His gaze was cold as he withdrew it, and he turned and disappeared into the darkness. Fong Xiaolun let out a long breath of relief only after the giant's figure had completely disappeared, and he almost collapsed in his seat. He looked down at the key in his hand and muttered, "This is the key that sent me here, right?" The black egg trembled slightly, as if in response, and then nodded gently. Fong Xiaolun looked at the black egg with a face of despair, tears welling up in his eyes. "I just want to live a peaceful life. You're so lucky, but you got me into this damn place." The man in the mask's gaze fell on Fong Xiaolun, and a flash of surprise crossed his eyes. This kid can actually jump directly to the giant world. He thought for a moment, and fragments of memories came to mind. "I remember, that guy also brought me here. Although the memory is incomplete, I do have some impression of this scene. If I'm not wrong, this should be the giant synthesis land." The man in the mask pondered for a moment, then whispered, "Never mind that. We need to leave as soon as possible." The two men ran quickly, looking around for an exit, but all they could see were endless giant spheres, as if the entire world was filled with them. On the way, Fong Xiaolun looked up at the sky. The large spheres hovering in midair were slowly rotating, an incredible number of them, like an eerie canopy. He asked in a low voice, "What the hell are these?" Just as he pondered, the man in the mask suddenly raised his hand, signaling for him to stop, because a huge orb in front of them was undergoing a strange transformation. Fong Xiaolun stared at the orb with wide eyes, his voice trembling slightly. Is something coming out?" The man in the mask's gaze sank slightly, his tone low but with a hint of gravity. "The education sphere is about to be produced." The next moment, the huge black sphere suddenly trembled, and countless strange cracks appeared on its surface. Immediately afterwards, boom, a blurry object was spat out from the inside of the sphere, like some kind of unformed life form. The object slowly fell to the ground, its outline still indistinct, as if it were a surging black fog. Fong Xiaolun and the masked man stared at the strange existence, and an uneasy feeling welled up in their hearts. "What the hell is that?" Fong Xiaolun muttered. Soon after, the object gradually solidified, and its vague outline gradually became clearer. A fishman with no facial features suddenly appeared before them. The man in the mask's expression changed slightly, and in a low voice, he slowly uttered 3 words, "Synthetic orcs." He looked around, his gaze falling on the countless floating orchard spheres, his eyes growing more and more solemn, and he whispered, "Here, there is no longer any need to transform humans into giants." Just then, a suffocating sense of oppression suddenly came from behind. Fong Xiaolun's heart suddenly tightened, as if a huge beast had appeared behind them. He turned his head stiffly, his pupils suddenly narrowing, an eye so huge it was indescribable, like a blood-red moon hanging in the sky, so deep it seemed to have no end. Then a low voice slowly sounded, as if from the endless abyss, found. The voice spoke slowly with endless indifference and judgment. "How dare 2 little worms trespass on the land of the educated?" Before the words had finished, a huge creature sprang out of the darkness. A huge one-eyed mastiff stepped out of the shadows. It was larger than any of the previous giants, and its dark red one-eyed stare locked onto the 2 people, revealing bloodthirsty excitement in its eyes. It opened its hideous mouth wide, raised its paw suddenly, and with a terrifying gust of wind, slammed it down hard on Fong Xiaolun. At the last minute, the figure of the man in the mask moved suddenly. He pressed his palm suddenly against Fong Xiaolun's head and slammed it down, boom. Fong Xiaolun's body suddenly sank downward, tumbling close to the ground, narrowly avoiding a fatal blow. At the last minute, the man in the mask suddenly exerted himself, and his body soared into the air like an arrow. A ball of eerie green flame suddenly condensed in his hands, and the fire leaped, releasing a strange energy fluctuation. Boom! The green flame, wrapped in a blazing shockwave, suddenly blasted towards the giant dog's neck. The masked man's eyes were like a sharp blade, and he shouted in a low voice, "Hold it off! You run!" Feng Xiaolun gritted his teeth. Although he was full of hesitation, he still turned around sharply and ran towards the distance. However, after only a few steps, his mind suddenly went blank, and then a sharp, tearing pain suddenly swept through his body. In the distance, a pale hand made the gesture of firing a gun. Bang! Feng Xiaolun's head felt as if it had really been hit by a bullet, and blood spurted out. A drop of scalding blood cut through the air, quietly landing on the black egg and seeping into the cracks in the shell. Feng Xiaolun's body stiffened. His pupils lost their focus, and then he lost his balance and fell heavily to the ground. The black egg floated silently in midair, witnessing it all happen. The bloodstains on the egg's shell slowly spread, as if being swallowed by some unknown force. Then, its surface suddenly erupted with violent tremors. The black egg's emotions suddenly erupted. Black energy surged wildly through the air, as if some kind of dormant existence had been completely awakened. Feng Xiaolun's consciousness gradually became blurred, and he felt as if his body was sinking, falling into some endless dark abyss. Damn it, am I going to die like this? I haven't found my real parents yet. I don't want to die. Just as despair swept over his consciousness, a strange and powerful energy suddenly rushed into his body. The black egg shell began to slowly peel off, and a dark energy filament spread out like a vein, crazily injecting Feng Xiaolun's body. This scene caused a flash of shock in the eyes of the giant in the distance. His body suddenly trembled, and he gritted his teeth and growled. This egg thing is messing with me. What's going on? My body is out of control. At the moment the black energy completely entered Feng Xiaolun's body, his body actually began to melt. The giant's face suddenly changed, and disbelief shone in his eyes. What's going on? He's melting. Just as this strange sight was happening, the liquid suddenly vibrated slightly, and a tiny drop of water floated out, glowing with a deep luster. Immediately afterwards, the liquid began to surge wildly, and the water droplet trembled violently, and in an instant, it quickly coalesced into a brand new human form. A moment later, the black liquid coalesced wildly, and a brand new figure slowly emerged. A man with white hair and a body covered in black runes suddenly opened his eyes. His pupils were deep and cold, and the black runes on his body seemed to be moving like living things, exuding a suffocating aura of power. The black giant's eyes widened, and an instinctive fear welled up in his heart. His voice trembled as he said, "What the hell is this guy?" However, Feng Xiaolun had not yet made a move. His gaze sank slightly, and as he was about to take a step, the masked man's crisis erupted instantly. Feng Xiaolun glanced sideways, his eyes suddenly fierce, and without the slightest hesitation, his figure suddenly shot out. He leapt up as fast as a black lightning bolt and charged straight at the one-eyed giant dog's face. Boom! Fists interlaced, and a violent force poured out. The punches hit the flesh. Each blow carried a terrifying impact, and the one-eyed giant dog's head was smashed hard, blood spraying wildly. In the face of the intense pain, it let out a terrifying roar. The giant dog was furious, and it suddenly pulled back, its sharp claws tearing through the air, carrying an unparalleled gust of wind, and slamming towards Feng Xiaolun. Feng Xiaolun's body flashed, narrowly avoiding the attack, landing firmly, his gaze sharp as a blade. The next moment, power condensed within him, flowing through his meridians and converging on the top of his foot. He took a sudden step forward, sweeping his foot across. A heavy kick. Feng Xiaolun's instep swept like a blade, and the terrifying impact force exploded in an instant, hitting the one-eyed giant dog's jaw hard. The giant dog's huge body suddenly soared into the air, falling backwards like a kite with its string broken. Boom! It slammed to the ground, the impact force blasting a deep crack in the ground and sending up a cloud of dust. Feng Xiaolun slowly withdrew his leg. Dark energy was still flowing around him. He turned gently and extended his hand to help the man in the mask up. The man in the mask looked up at him, his gaze falling on the black energy still spilling from the palm of his hand. His pupils trembled slightly, his expression complex and shocked. However, before the two of them could catch their breath, they were trapped between the dog and the man. At this moment, the one-eyed giant dog growled fiercely, and 3 energy cores like spheres appeared on its head. Arcs jumped between the spheres, thunder clashed, and the air was instantly torn apart by electricity, filling the air with a terrifying aura of destruction. The man in the mask's face suddenly changed, his expression aghast, and he growled, "No good, run." However, before the words had finished, dazzling blue-white light suddenly burst out between the 3 thunderballs. Immediately afterwards, a beam of annihilation that ripped through the heavens, and Earth shot out with a loud roar, targeting Feng Xiaoluan directly. Die. The low growl of the one-eyed giant dog shook the heavens and Earth. But at the moment when the annihilation beam was about to engulf them, Feng Xiaoluan's gaze was calm, and he lightly extended a hand with his 5 fingers slightly open. The terrifying, annihilating beam, just as it touched his palm, instantly froze. The destructive energy, which was powerful enough to rip apart space, suddenly stopped in front of his palm, as if being suppressed by some invisible force. The one-eyed giant dog stared at Feng Xiaoluan's palm with its bloodshot, single eye, unable to believe what it saw. The beam of light, powerful enough to annihilate everything, was actually being blocked by his bare hand. Its voice became trembling with fear. No, no way. Feng Xiaoluan slowly turned his head, his gaze falling on the man in the mask. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but there was no sound. The man in the mask frowned, his gaze suspicious. What did he say? Black Egg shook his head, calmly translating. He said, "One person at a time, no debts owed to each other." The man in the mask was suddenly stunned, his face full of question marks. What does that mean? Feng Xiaoluan suddenly realized that something was wrong. He opened his mouth and tried again, but the result was Abba Abba. He covered his mouth in despair, his eyes full of shock. What's going on? Why can't I speak anymore? The Black Egg sighed helplessly, his tone flat. Fighting has caused too rapid a promotion, and your language function has not yet adapted. Black and White Egg on the side added, what he just said was, one person at a time, no debts owed to each other. Feng Xiaoluan blinked, dumbfounded, pointing at himself and pronouncing with difficulty, ABA. Black Egg gave a sharp jolt and urged, stop ABA. Quickly use your big move. Big move. Feng Xiaoluan was stunned for a moment, and just as he was wondering, a complete set of battle technique deductions suddenly appeared in his mind. Every detail and every energy flow line was clearly visible. He slowly raised his hand, gathering a dazzling ball of light in the palm of his hand. The violent energy spun like a whirlpool, crazily devouring the air. Energy erosion, kill. The light beam was like a divine punishment that ripped the heavens and earth, carrying a devastating impact and rushing straight at the 3 thunderballs above the giant dog's head. Woof! The giant dog screamed, and its huge body slammed down to the ground like a giant object with a broken string. The thunderballs instantly shattered, and the impact of the burst of energy blackened its skin and flesh, completely disabling it. Witnessing this scene, the man in the mask's pupils suddenly contracted, and the waves of emotions in his heart caused him to be shocked into temporary speechlessness. He slowly turned his head and locked eyes with the Black Egg, and the two of them, their gazes meeting, both could not hide their disbelief. This is too strong. The Black Egg trembled slightly, absorbing the energy that had overflowed from Feng Xiaoluan, causing his energy field to gradually stabilize. Feng Xiaoluan took a deep breath, feeling his body finally return to normal and the runaway power in his body completely quiet down. On the other side, the black giant collapsed to the ground, unable to move at all. His face was completely gloomy, and his gaze fixed on Feng Xiaoluan and the man in the mask, muttering, these 2 bugs, they both have an egg? Impossible, this is impossible. His fists clenched, his eyes gradually becoming crazed. Even a crow ghost lord could not resurrect the ancient egg. How could they possibly know? Am I overthinking this? Suddenly, the black giant's communicator suddenly sounded, and the low electronic sound echoed in the silent air. Colleagues, Lord Crow Ghost has passed through the bronze mirror gate and brought the big shot into the giant's garden. Giants in the vicinity, please stand by. Feng Xiaoluan and the man in the mask heard the sound of the communicator at the same time, and their eyes immediately widened. The black giant slowly pressed the communication button, and the corner of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing a sinister smile. Great! Lord Crow Ghost is back. If we can offer these two people to him, it should be a good gift. Fang Xiaolun's eyes changed slightly, his brows knitted, and he whispered, "Is that an alarm sound? Or is it signaling his companions?" Before the words had finished leaving his mouth, a low, strange grunting sound suddenly came from behind him. Fang Xiaolun and the man in the mask quickly turned their heads, and they saw, behind them, a monstrous creature with a distorted form. Before they could react, more figures slowly emerged from the darkness. 1, 2, 3. In no time at all, there were more than 10 of them, and they were still growing. These monsters were all different shapes and sizes, twisted and terrifying. Some had multiple eyes, some were covered in black carapaces, and some had open, bloody mouths dripping with unknown fluids. Fang Xiaolun's face changed slightly, and he muttered an oath. What the hell are these things? There are just too many of them. The man in the mask lifted his head slightly, his eyes sharp and his tone calm. No matter what they are, let's cooperate and break out of here first. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his hands wide, his fingers curling slightly. Blue flames danced in the palms of his hands, gathering violent energy. The next second, like an arrow released from a bow, he charged into the group of monsters. His hands danced with blue flames, and wherever he went, the monsters were instantly engulfed in flames and reduced to ashes. Fang Xiaolun's eyes widened in shock. So strong. This guy seems to be able to easily handle these monsters on his own, and he doesn't even need my help. But soon he noticed something strange. He was able to effortlessly dodge the attacks of these monsters. Strange, his eyes flickered slightly, and he muttered, "Why are these monsters' movements so slow?" In the distance, the voice of the black and white egg suddenly sounded, with a hint of doubt in its tone. "Master, is this kid's martial arts skills really that good?" "No." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, his tone low and cold. "It's not that his skills have improved, it's that his very existence has slowed down the attacks of these strange insects. Now we can be 100% sure. This black egg is the egg of doom recorded in the ancient books." The voice of the black and white egg suddenly turned cold, with a hint of excited eagerness. "Master, then should we seize his power while we can? The situation is chaotic and full of danger. Isn't this the best opportunity?" The black and white egg continued, his tone anxious. "But, Master, if we seize the power of the black egg earlier, we can leave here earlier and rescue Miss Phil earlier." The man's eyes darkened slightly, and his tone was cold. "There's no rush. The most important thing right now is to focus on the situation at hand." On the other side, Fang Xiaolun leaped excitedly, easily avoiding the attack of a monster. He looked at the black egg in surprise and said excitedly, "Black egg, look, I can easily deal with these monsters too." However, the black egg's voice carried a hint of urgency. "Xiaolun, don't get too excited. That giant will be back on its feet in 2 minutes. Hurry, don't forget to get the key." Fang Xiaolun suddenly realized that he had almost forgotten the key. He quickly thought back. The key. He had just thrown it near the giant. Without further thought, he turned sharply, gave his feet a push, and sprinted towards the location of the key. In the distance, the black and white egg's voice trailed off slightly before it took on a gloomy tone. "That kid, where is he running to?" Fang Xiaolun was extremely fast, and in no time at all, he found the key. It was lying quietly on the ground, with a faint energy fluctuation still remaining on its surface. But the moment he reached out to pick up the key, a sense of danger suddenly approached. The Cyclops' bloodshot, I snapped around, locking onto Fang Xiaolun. The air was suffused with a sense of oppression. Fang Xiaolun's heart skipped a beat, and his hand just touched the key. Boom! A furious gust of wind whistled in, and a huge fist smashed down. The Cyclops grinned, his voice low and sinister. "What? Damn it. I finally managed to move, but now I'm frozen again." Fang Xiaolun instinctively closed his eyes and felt the devastating shockwave sweep over him. However, the excruciating pain he expected did not come. He opened his eyes and saw the giant's fist frozen in midair, unable to advance an inch. The black egg was floating in front of him, emitting a dim and mysterious glow. Fang Xiaolun froze for a moment, then grinned and gasped. "I thought I was really going to die this time. Thanks, Black Egg. Black Egg, what's wrong with you? Can you hear my voice? Black Egg." Fang Xiaolun looked down at Black Egg and called anxiously, but it didn't respond in the slightest. As soon as the words fell, the energy that had been flowing on the surface of the black egg suddenly dissipated. The whole egg seemed to have lost its vitality, becoming listless and powerless, as if it had used up all its strength. Fong Xiaolun gritted his teeth and suddenly bit down on the key with his mouth, while supporting the black egg with both hands. Black egg? Black egg, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me. The Cyclops saw this, and his gaze sharpened. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. It's true. It's this thing that's affecting me. A hideous smile curled the corners of his mouth. His voice was cold and menacing. Humph. Without the help of this thing, just where do you think you can escape to? Fong Xiaolun took a deep breath, held the black egg tightly, and his gaze was firm. Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you. The Cyclops raised his hand sharply, grabbed Fong Xiaolun, and grinned coldly as he raised the corner of his mouth. See, little bug, where can you go? However, at this critical moment, a black shadow suddenly rushed from a distance. Boom! The Cyclops dog suddenly knocked away the giant's arm, so fast that it almost turned into an afterimage. The Cyclops opened his one eye wide and shouted in surprise. Tinos! Great, you're okay. But before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly froze. Without a moment's rest, the giant dog ignored him completely, bared its fangs, grabbed Fong Xiaolun by the collar, and lifted him up in one bite. It then spun around and ran away in a flash. Tinos, wait. The Cyclops froze for a moment. Then his face suddenly changed. He roared, Tinos, what's wrong with you? Where are you taking him? Tinos! Fong Xiaolun was shocked as he was carried in midair by the giant dog. He couldn't help but analyze frantically in his mind. What's going on? Is it helping me? Could it be that the energy erosion technique is actually a manipulation or subjugation skill? Holy shit, this is awesome. He looked up sharply and saw the masked man in the distance. He shouted, hurry up and get up here. He's on our side. The masked man's eyes narrowed, and without hesitation, he used his legs to launch himself into the air, using the ground as a springboard. He landed firmly on the back of the one-eyed giant dog. Meanwhile, the one-eyed giant watched as his beloved dog ran off with the enemy in its mouth. He was frozen in place, unable to believe what he was seeing, and muttered in disbelief, what? His face was rigid, his thoughts temporarily stalled, and he was completely frozen. But just a moment later, his one eye suddenly lit up, as if he had thought of something. A cold smile slowly curled the corner of his mouth. This egg can actually control Typhon? If that's the case, then perhaps we can use its power. Reclaim the shell of the Colossus from the Emperor Worm. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but burst out laughing, his tone tinged with excitement and the sense of a successful plot. Haha, yes, this time, I will definitely be able to gain the praise of Lord Crow Ghost. On the other side, Fong Xiaolun sat steadily on the back of the one-eyed giant dog, turned his head to look at the man in the mask, and asked, My name is Fong Xiaolun. What's your name? Are you from here? The masked man was silent for a second, then spoke indifferently, southeast. I came here through a space jump just like you. At the time, I was in the cave, and because I noticed the abnormality of the engineer's egg, I followed it all the way in. Fong Xiaolun frowned slightly and muttered, Space jump? Could this be the ability of the black egg? The black and white egg in the southeast vibrated slightly, and it calmly explained, yes, that is its ability. So, this key is the key to going back. However, just then, the black and white egg suddenly vibrated, and a strange energy filled the air. It had activated its ability to devour, and was trying to devour the black egg. Donan's face suddenly changed, his pupils shrank, and he shouted, Yinji, don't be impulsive. At the same time, the black egg sensed something unusual as the energy fluctuations flickered slightly, and its consciousness suddenly awakened. Pop! Without hesitation, the black egg raised a black shadow and slapped Yinji hard. Dongnan responded extremely quickly, immediately reaching out to catch the black and white egg and holding it steadily in his arms. Fong Xiaolun's eyes lit up, and he exclaimed in surprise, Black egg, you're awake. Dongnan frowned, his tone tinged with a hint of helplessness. Didn't I tell you not to act recklessly? Are you hurt? Black and white egg trembled slightly, and their voices carried a hint of guilt. Master, I'm fine. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have disobeyed you. However, just then, Fong Xiaolun suddenly exclaimed, wait a minute. That's strange. Is that a wall in front of us? As far as they could see, a hazy, transparent wall slowly emerged, like an illusion woven from light, spanning in front of them. Fong Xiaolun reached out to touch it, his palms sliding across the wall. His brows furrowed slightly, and he muttered, It feels a lot like the wall. The texture, could it be that this is outside the wall? Then doesn't that mean that our original world is on the other side of this wall. He looked down at the black egg in his arms, his tone slightly worried. Say, "Black egg, are you really okay?" The black egg's energy fluctuated slightly, and it responded with a hint of fatigue. "Fortunately, I just activated my defensive reserve energy. I'm just a little tired and unable to use my abilities for the time being." Fang Xiaolun's gaze tightened slightly, and he repeated it in a low voice. "Defense? That guy, Dark Ji, was trying to attack you." The black egg was silent for a moment, and his tone was indifferent. "I don't know. Maybe it was an unconscious defense, but Xiaolun, we can't trust other people too much." Fang Xiaolun's eyes darkened slightly, his expression complex, as he whispered, "Well, I understand that. After all, after that incident, I don't easily trust others anymore." Just then, Dongnan looked at Fang Xiaolun, his tone solemn. "Well, shouldn't we first sort out the current situation, organize our thoughts, and calmly analyze it?" Fang Xiaolun pondered for a moment and nodded. "Well, it's time to sort things out." Dongnan said thoughtfully, "You said that after you inserted the key into the keyhole of the red egg soldier, you came here." "That's right. The black egg must have set him up as the medium for the door." Fang Xiaolun frowned and repeated doubtfully, "The red egg soldier is the medium for the door?" Dongnan nodded. "Yes, if he really is the medium of the door, and he is not here right now, that is the best proof." Fang Xiaolun scratched his hair and couldn't help but mutter, "In the final analysis, it is still this key that is causing trouble." He turned his head and looked at Black Egg, his tone becoming solemn. "Black Egg, can you tell me, where exactly is this place? Is it really outside the wall?" Black Egg trembled slightly, and then suddenly a ray of light flashed on the surface of its shell. The next second, a map was projected. It was a huge egg-shaped map, with different areas clearly marked on it. At the same time, Black Egg deliberately marked their current location with light spots. Fang Xiaolun was shocked, his eyes wide open and full of confusion. "I can't understand this at all. So, are we in another egg-shaped world? It's a bit strange to be outside the so-called wall." Southeast gazed at the projected map, his brow furrowed. Suddenly, he realized something, his eyes changing suddenly. He whispered, "No, that's not right. We are not outside the wall, but still inside it." The light and shadow of the black egg shook slightly, and its voice firmly responded, "Yes. According to the markings on the map, we are still inside the wall. Look, this is where we were originally." Upon seeing this, the black egg shook slightly, and the light and shadow cast a dynamic demonstration. "This is Xiaolun, and this is me. Then we came here. In the light and shadow, a faint trail marked their route, eventually stopping at their current position." Fang Xiaolun frowned, pointed at the large blank area on the map, and asked doubtfully, "Then, what about this large part?" The light and shadow of the black egg fluctuated slightly, and it explained in a flat tone, "That is an unmanifested region." Fang Xiaolun let out a gasp, shocked. "This whole area is unmanifested? How big is this egg-shaped wall anyway? Is this really the only small part of the world we live in? And it doesn't even look spherical." The black egg gave off a slight vibration and said in a calm tone, "That is a visual illusion caused by your human brains." Southeast slightly narrowed his eyes and said thoughtfully, "To be precise, it's the wall that's causing us to be mistaken, isn't it?" Fang Xiaolun's expression suddenly became complicated, and he whispered with gritted teeth, "The wall." Again, the light and shadow of the black egg flickered slightly, and it said in a low voice, "Sometimes what you see may not be real." Fang Xiaolun's brows furrowed even deeper, and his tone was full of unease. "So what exactly is this wall? Is it some kind of living thing? Could it be that we have been living inside a giant living thing this whole time? That's just too weird." There was a second of silence in the southeast before Fang Xiaolun said slowly, "All I know is that the wall is a living thing with its own will. But if you want to know more, I think you should ask the black egg. It should know more than I do." The black egg swayed slightly and said indifferently, "I don't know. My memory point began from the moment Luan and I first met." Fang Xiaolun frowned and pursued unwillingly, "But you could draw a map, so you must still know something." The black egg was silent for a moment, then slowly explained, "The map is because I captured the singularity." Fang Xiaolun repeated doubtfully, "A singularity? What is that?" Dongnan paused slightly, then said slowly, "A singularity is a place where time and space are distorted, right?" The black egg shook slightly, responding affirmatively, "That's right. Before, we passed through two singularities, and they connected two spaces. That's why we suddenly appeared here. Feng Xiaolun nodded thoughtfully, then asked, so, if we want to go back, we have to go through these two singularities, right? The black egg paused slightly and replied in a calm tone, no, after I used them. They have disappeared. Feng Xiaolun's eyes widened, and he spoke anxiously. What? Then how are we going to go back? The black egg rotated slightly, projecting the shadow of a key, and said indifferently, through the key. It has already memorized our starting position. As long as we find the door hole generated simultaneously with it, we can go back. Feng Xiaolun frowned, thought for a moment, and then asked, is the door hole like the keyhole on the red egg soldier before? The black egg shook slightly, and its tone was affirmative. That's right. That is the door hole that was generated synchronously with this side. Feng Xiaolun rubbed his chin and asked thoughtfully, what about the door hole on this side? Is it where we were just sent? The black egg let out a slight hum and continued to explain, originally, it should be there. However, during the process of capturing the singularity, it was interfered with by an unknown force. The black egg flashed slightly and added, this force, I'm afraid it wants to take us to another place. Fortunately, I copied the coordinates in advance and stored them in the key. However, the door hole was intercepted by that force. After listening to Feng Xiaolun, his face suddenly changed, and he muttered angrily, intercepted? Could it be the work of the raven ghost here? If it really was him, that would be bad. He frowned tightly and asked hurriedly, Black Egg, where was the door hole intercepted to? Black Egg vibrated slightly, projecting a map, and a light point flashed in one of the areas. It's here, in the manifestation area. Southeast stared at the map with a calm gaze, pointed at one of the circular areas, and asked, Black Egg, this spherical place, do you know what it is? Black Egg paused for a moment before slowly saying, this, it appeared together with the manifestation area. But I don't know what it is either. Feng Xiaolun frowned, as if realizing something, and asked in surprise, wait, appear together means we can find it in Giant Land? The black egg vibrated slightly, affirming yes. Since the door hole has appeared, it means we can find it here. Upon hearing this, Dongnan's face instantly changed, his pupils shrinking, and an expression of unmistakable surprise revealed in his expression. Feng Xiaolun narrowed his eyes slightly, staring thoughtfully at Dongnan, while quietly whispering his heart to Black Egg, Black Egg, I can be 100% sure. They definitely haven't been here before. From the way he calmly dealt with the monsters along the way, I knew something was wrong. After pondering for a moment, Black Egg decided to ask Dongnan directly. However, Feng Xiaolun hurriedly stopped him, speaking in a low voice, don't. If he doesn't volunteer any information, it means he doesn't want to. Let's not make things difficult for ourselves. But what's for sure is that he definitely knows a lot. Feng Xiaolun's mouth curled up slightly, his eyes darkened a little, and he continued in a low voice, if we ultimately fail to find the door hole, then he will be our last resort. Therefore, we must keep a close eye on him. We cannot let them out of our sight. He looked back at Black Egg, his tone tinged with anxiety. Black Egg, is there really no way to narrow down the location of this intercepted door hole? Black Egg shook slightly, then calmly replied, don't panic. In fact, we can use the key's visual sharing function. Feng Xiaolun was slightly startled and asked in surprise, the key has a visual sharing function? Feng Xiaolun frowned, his eyes narrowing, and asked in a low voice, use the key? How do we do that? The black egg swayed slightly and explained calmly, because there's a connection between the key and the door hole that the visual information that the door hole can see can be shared with us through the key. After saying this, the black egg floated lightly and picked up the key. It aimed the key at Feng Xiaolun's head, its tone soft and low. Don't be afraid. Relax. Then, close your eyes. When the key touched Feng Xiaolun, it instantly radiated a strange energy fluctuation, and circles of invisible airfields spread out in all directions. Feng Xiaolun felt a dizziness, and then the world suddenly changed. When he opened his eyes again, his vision was completely different. This is the perspective of the door hole. Wow, the area under the semicircular membrane is actually a city. He looked down in surprise and saw hands. This door hole is indeed attached to a person. Locked up. So, is he a prisoner being escorted? He slowly raised his gaze to look at the escort, a woman sitting on a high seat, her posture cold and majestic. Feng Xiaolun's heart pounded, his pupils narrowing as he muttered, it's her. This guy is in a high position. She must be the one who intercepted the door hole. However, As he continued to observe, the woman seemed to sense something. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she slowly looked in Fang Xiaolun's viewing direction. The mysterious woman gave a faint smile, with a slight arc at the corner of her mouth. She slowly lifted her finger, as if flicking it lightly. The next second, Fang Xiaolun's vision gradually blurred, and the scene in front of him slowly closed, turning into a darkness. When his vision returned to reality, Fang Xiaolun suddenly opened his eyes wide, his heart cold, and a layer of cold sweat instantly oozing from his back. Damn it! Did she find me? Sensing Fang Xiaolun's unusual state, the black egg asked anxiously, "Xiaolun, what's wrong?" Fang Xiaolun's expression was grave, his brows knitted, as he whispered, "The door hole was defeated by a mysterious girl. I suspect that girl is the one who intercepted the door hole's power. The most important thing is that she seemed to see me." The black egg vibrated slightly, and its tone was low as it analyzed. If the door hole is attached to a living creature, then during the process of shared vision, there will be a slight change in the pupil. If that young girl is strong enough to intercept the shared perspective, then the possibility that she noticed you is extremely high. But more than that, did you take a good look at your surroundings? Fang Xiaolun took a deep breath on hearing this, crouched down, and sketched a rough outline on the ground with his hand, saying as he drew, "I see a city. It is covered by a translucent, circular, white membrane, and the entire city is shrouded under the membrane. It's like this." He pointed at a small figure in the picture and added, "From the screams just now, I can tell that the door hole is a woman, and her hands are firmly locked." Southeast stared at the sketch Fang Xiaolun had drawn, narrowed his eyes slightly, and after a moment of contemplation, asked if her hands are locked, then the identity of the door hole would be the prisoner, or some kind of escort. Besides that, have you noticed any other information? Fang Xiaolun frowned, carefully recalling everything he had seen from the perspective of the door hole just now, and whispered, "The woman who intercepted the door hole was all in white and didn't look very old. However, there were two other people on either side of her. They were in a cave, standing at the entrance, looking into the distance at the city shrouded in a semicircular membrane." Southeast's expression twitched slightly, and he asked in a low voice, "The other two people, did you see their faces? Or was there anything distinctive about the way they were dressed?" Fang Xiaolun recalled, and slowly shook his head. They were significantly larger than the woman in white. They were wearing cloaks with hoods, covering them up completely, so I didn't see their faces, but I'm not sure if they were giants. Just then, the black egg suddenly vibrated a little, and a hint of alarm could be heard in its tone. "Reitlin, I forgot to tell you something just now. Have you noticed the number on the key that has been counting down?" Fang Xiaolun was slightly startled, and his gaze fell subconsciously on the key. He frowned, "Huh? What does that number mean?" The light and shadow of the black egg flickered slightly, and its voice said calmly, "That is the time the key exists. When the countdown reaches 0, the key will disappear." Fang Xiaolun's face instantly changed, his pupils shrank, and he gasped in shock. "What?" However, at that moment, his ears twitched slightly, catching a strange sound. Don't speak. There's movement." Dongnan's gaze suddenly sank, and he whispered, "We can't stay here any longer. We have to get out of here quickly." But just then, Dongnan's face suddenly changed, his pupils suddenly constricting, revealing a look of extreme shock. Fang Xiaolun felt a cold touch on his back, and he slowly turned his head. What reflected in his pupils was the face of a strange woman. She had appeared silently behind him at some point, like a twisted specter clinging to his back. Fang Xiaolun's neck stiffened, cold sweat trickled down his forehead, his mouth twitching slightly as he muttered in a low voice, What the hell?" He looked down suddenly, but found that something had wrapped itself around his abdomen. "What is this?" "Vines!" He tried to break free, but no matter how hard he pulled, the vines tightened around him, as if they were alive and contracting. "Damn it, I can't get off." Fang Xiaolun struggled with all his might, but the vines held him so tightly that he could hardly breathe. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Let go of me." Just as the situation was about to become critical, another man slowly walked out of the darkness. Southeast's eyes flashed, and he quickly adjusted his posture, his muscles tensing as he braced himself for action. However, the man paid no heed to their hostility. He walked slowly forward, reached out without hesitation, and grabbed the black egg suspended in the air. His gaze was deep and cold, his mouth slightly raised, and his tone carried an unmistakable indifference. "This black, ancient egg relic, may I borrow it? In exchange, I can tell you dash where that city is. Feng Xiaoluan's heart suddenly pounded. His pupils constricted, and a storm raged in his mind upon hearing these words. Ancient egg relic? Why'd he call the black egg that? Who the hell is he? Feng Xiaoluan's face was gloomy, and he stared at the man and woman in front of him. His tone was low, with a hint of a probing question. When did you start following us? The woman smiled slightly, her tone flirtatious, with a hint of careless banter. From the time you were at the education place and playing hide-and-seek with Tinos and the others, but she trailed off meaningfully, the corners of her mouth deepening in contempt. Are really slow. You actually waited until now to find us. Feng Xiaoluan's mind instantly exploded, his heart pounding, and he whispered in shock, What? You actually followed us from that time on. The man saw that they were taking too long to respond, and his face suddenly turned dark. A hint of impatience appeared in his eyes, and he angrily snapped in a cold tone, Get lost. I'm asking you, how? Feng Xiaoluan gritted her teeth, glared angrily at the man, and retorted in an icy tone, without budging an inch, How? You arrest people. Is this how you ask for help? The woman let out a light laugh, slowly reached out and put her arms around Feng Xiaoluan, her tone playful yet cold. Beg? The Emperor needs to beg you. She snorted in contempt, her tone suddenly cold. Her gaze was fierce as a blade. Don't push it. Southeast narrowed his eyes and said tentatively in a slightly lowered voice. So, what you're saying is, our negotiations have broken down? The woman laughed lightly, her tone gentle but tinged with a deadly chill. Alas, in that case, I'll kill this man in the mask. You shouldn't have a problem with that. The owner of the ancient egg relic. As soon as the words fell, the man known as the Emperor suddenly struck, his body transforming into a swift shadow as he charged at Dongnan. However, a miraculous scene occurred. The figure of the Emperor unexpectedly penetrated Dongnan's body without hindrance. Dongnan suddenly opened his eyes wide, his entire body suddenly stiffening, his heart filled with shock. What's going on? He passed through my body. Before he could react, the Emperor had already flashed behind him. Next, the Emperor's figure kept darting in and out of Dongnan's body, moving so fast that it looked like a blur, with no discernible pattern. Dongnan stared at him, growing increasingly anxious, and growled in a low voice. What the hell is he doing? Why does he keep going through me? Suddenly, Dongnan's pupils narrowed as he sensed a strange fluctuation in the air. He gritted his teeth. Something's wrong. Damn it. This time, it's a physical attack. Humph. Using a clone to distract my vision, and then using a physical body to attack. Dongnan's mouth curled slightly, his gaze gradually cold, his body sinking slightly, poised and ready to go, muttering, Good, I've figured out your style. Now wait for me to strike back. However, Dee suddenly let out a loud laugh, with a hint of amusement and contempt in his tone. Ha 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 ha. So the thing you're most afraid of is actually yourself without a mask? Dongnan's face suddenly changed, his pupils suddenly constricted, and he roared furiously, You bastard! How dare you? Peek in my heart. The Emperor gave a faint smile, spread his hands, and spoke in a flirtatious tone. That's ridiculous. This is the first time I've seen someone afraid of what they look like without a mask. What the hell is this? Dongnan took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down and observe the Emperor's actions with sharp eyes, speculating in his heart. This guy is creating an explosion by squeezing air, right? Just then, Feng Xiaoluan suddenly spoke up, his tone serious. Dongnan, don't be fooled. He fixed his gaze on the Emperor and said decisively, This guy hasn't even taken a single step away from where he started. Dongnan's heart suddenly sank at these words, and his face instantly paled. What's going on?